Welcome back to the Tell It Like It Is podcast, episode 49. I'm continuing with Mark Zuctovich. Thank you, Mark, for sticking around.
Absolutely. It's been great. Loving it.
The conversation's going well. You know, your history in broadcast is definitely paying off. I really appreciate it.
You're a pro, man. You're already a pro. I can tell you. Come on now.
I'm really excited about, this work that we're talking about. And, you mentioned one thing about getting older and valuing your peace. And I just turned 40 this year, and I feel like that's where I'm at.
You hurt me, man. You hurt me with that. 40. Come on now.
But I'm serious. Like, yeah. When I did my social work in the city, I felt like a chicken with my head cut off.
Mm-hmm.
And I got to a point when I moved to New Jersey, I was like, all right, I can't just keep going. I have to shift, figure things out. So I started doing different things. But like you said, I'm still passionate about the work. So I'm just approaching the work a little bit differently.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. One of the things that always gets me stirred up are the people who I know are well informed. They read the New York Times, like they know the issues better than me. They follow the political stories. They can tell you every bill that Obama passed. Like these well-informed people, they know how messed up all of these things are. They know. But there's this kind of passivity about like, well, what are you going to do? You pay your taxes, you vote, and you just kind of hope.
Yeah.
It's scary to me because you have Mexican children who are being ripped apart from their parents and people on horseback with whips, whipping people. Like this is 2021,
Yeah.
So one of the things I really try to do is ask the question, like, what are we seriously going to do? So there's a group of people who are more informed than me. If I try to say anything to them, they can tell me a million things I don't know. But I think we have to have some amount of action. You can't just read the New York Times, pay your taxes, and vote. Like that's not going to make America better.
Right.
And these people say, I don't know what to do. So what should we be doing?
Wow, it is a loaded question. It is a loaded question, and I like you say, there are people much bigger and better than I am in dissecting this issue. I'll tell you one thing that I think would make a dramatic impact on the world, because I think we all have these illusions of grandeur, like I'm going to change the world, right? I'm going to make the world a better place. And when you start thinking, this is the one case where I think thinking big is not a good idea. Right? Otherwise, I think thinking big is great, but this is one case where think small, right? So if you really want to change the world, imagine if one person could change the life of one other person, and imagine that cumulative effect. And this is my way of transitioning to the topic of mentoring, right? Which I think, to me, was the most bang for the buck in terms of my experiences working in the mentoring field, volunteering.
You're a big brother.
Yeah, I was a big brother for 8 years, right? So I see the impact that it can have. It's not a perfect system, like nothing is, but it certainly has enough of an impact to change the trajectory of a young person's life. I honestly believe that if every person in this world took on someone else, I'm not saying move in with, I'm not saying that you have to like be with them 24. I'm just saying just a check-in every day or every week. How you doing? How is school going? Anything like that. Doesn't have to be a huge investment. I really believe, and by the way, adults can mentor adults, as you know, that they can do that also. I really believe that one-on-one relationship, especially if it's someone that's not like you in any way, that's really beneficial. I really believe that is the way to start changing the world, right? um, my experiences mentoring, I mentored the same young man from the age of 10, and he's going to be 21 in May. Um, yeah, that makes me feel that makes me feel really, really old.
So
I,
I want you to I 100% agree with you. And when I was at Covenant House, I saw people who were doing relatively well, but they had no support system, no idea of how to do better, no idea how to turn those gifts into a career. They were just kind of clueless, just
mhm.
feeling like, literally clueless. So, America's a very big place, right? With a lot of avenues and intelligent things. And when you have that intellectual person who's well read and knows the New York Times, you could just talking to someone for 2 hours a week would change their life. And that's literally what you're saying.
Yeah, absolutely. And the investment is so small. I mean, again, you're not asking to take over someone's life. You're not asking them to adopt them. If that happens, great. But I'm just saying that if you just have that occasional support network, remind them that they have someone there for them, right? Um, and it's especially important. I think it's important everywhere, but in our cities, it's really important. The young people like here in New York City face challenges, obviously, that other kids don't face, right? I mean, so I think that intervention, having someone, especially in parent households where there's only one parent, maybe that parent needs some help, needs some support. Um, and going back to the topic we were talking about before the break about, growing up healthy men, that's where you start. I mean, if you have a good model to follow, one of the things I always say is the reason why men are so broken is because they didn't have a model. There was no one to show them the way, right? And that's because they were never shown the way. It's a perpetual cycle of this stuff, right? So yeah, I think mentoring is, I would love to see on a national scale, I would love to see more investment in mentoring, because they're really, while mentoring should not be rewarded financially necessarily, I do believe that if you gave some kind of incentive to people to get involved, whether it's a tax break, whether it's maybe you can write off all your expenses with the young person you're mentoring, you take them out to the movies, you know what I'm saying? So there should be something to encourage people to be involved. I really would like to see more investments in that. I think, I was fortunate growing up. I grew up, in a family of four. My parents were married the entire time I was growing up. I never wanted for, we weren't living in a mansion, but I never wanted for anything. I always had, if not my family, I always had a support network of extended family and also neighbors. Neighbors are nowadays. I live in Queens in Jackson Heights, and I may know some people in my building, but if I walked outside my building, I don't know who my neighbors are. I never speak to them. That living in I just never talk to them. So yeah, I just think that mentoring is one of those ways to change the world in a very meaningful, effective way. Yeah.
The whole neighbor thing really scares me. It's a lot of people, you don't know who you're walking by. People are going through things and we don't know each other. Like, the culture has gotten so isolated now. You know,
Yes.
it's one of those things. The city is now beautiful compared to what it was in the 80s. But in the 80s, you had more sense of who everyone was, and you talk to each other, and that's what I mean by the good old days.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of it I might not even been there, but I just kind of got this sense of the good old days versus where
You're
we're
right.
living now.
Yeah, you're right. I mean, I'll tell you two things from that era that I remember in the suburbs where I lived. It was the as corny as it sounds, we used to have our neighbors come over for coffee and cake. That was they come over. My mother would put a pot of coffee on. They would have cake. they would chat, blah, blah, blah. But in New York City, when I used to visit my relatives living in Brooklyn when I was a kid growing up, they had stoop culture, which was you would sit on the stoop of your brownstone or your building, right? And you would just sit there and you would talk to everyone as they come by. People would come by, they, and they, yeah, you knew who everyone was. You knew who everyone was. But I think that alienation or that isolation you're talking about is the result of many things. It's the result of, church attendance is not what it used to be. Church used to be like a very popular place to catch up, to meet people, your neighbors, right? So that's a factor. Technology has enabled us to now text people or,
stick the earphones in.
Yeah, go on Zoom, and there's no more that one-on-one all the time like there used to be. Transportation options have changed. When I was a kid, we never ventured far from our home. We just got in the car and drove around town and whatever. Now people are getting on planes, and I know it sounds crazy, but when I was a kid, flying was a luxury. Okay, when I was a kid, when you got on a flight, you got dressed up. And you used to go places that you never went before. Nowadays, you just book a flight, you go. So I just think, going back to what you said before about the good old days, you mentioned the word simplicity, simpler time. And I think that is what fuels my love of the outdoors so much, is that feeling of simplicity. It's a return to my nature. It's a return to my to the way I feel best, the most joyous, right? Simple nature, because nature doesn't demand anything from you. It can turn on you and be deadly, but it doesn't demand anything from you. It doesn't care if you're rich, poor, black, white, gay, straight. You're just this other being making your way through my territory, right? And as long as you're giving yourself to nature, nature gives back to you in so many beautiful ways, right? Humans aren't quite that. I think dogs, sometimes cats, but mostly dogs and nature are probably the only things that are loyal like that. Everything else you can't rely on pretty much, unfortunately, But yeah, I think it's dangerous to think that the old days were perfect or good or very good, because they often were not in many ways. But I think if we can combine some of the great elements of today, like the access we have to the world now we never had before, right? And combine them with some of those simple, ways of looking at life. I think we can be in a much better place. Yeah.
Yeah. So a lot of, if you ask me, Alexi, what defines success in terms of the podcast and the projects, everything that I talk about on the way I talk on this podcast, this is how I talk every day. These are the kind of conversations that I don't know if it's just me or if they just come up because I'm around or because I ask the questions and I go that way. But I'm always saying, how can we make this better? And as you were talking, we recently had a block party on my block, and
wow, that's old school,
right? And I just moved to this block at the like November 2019, so that was like right before the pandemic, kind of. And they were saying they hadn't done it in a while, and little by little I had started meeting people. And I think for me, like being black, like I think I experience an awkwardness. And like you said, on your first day at work, I kind of anticipate what the other people are thinking before they even say it or act it out, right? So there's certain hurdles that we're kind of dealing with, but I always strive. My ultimate goal is to live in community. My goal is to have that stoop where people are coming by and I'm going there and they're inviting me for coffee and I can knock on their door and just hang out and to live like that every day, not just I see you once every month and we do this coffee date because we plan it once a month when it's just like I want to live like that every day. Like someone can show up for dinner. Like, I don't feel like cooking today, just going to a friend's house and just, so to me, that's what the good old days is. That kind of,
Hmm.
and that's what I don't just, I'm not just talking about it on the podcast now for like, oh, we're talking about, this is what I live on Harrison Street. This is what I'm doing on Harrison Street, and as you were talking, I live in Princeton, so there's grad students, people I don't know. Like I said, I just got here in 2019, plus the pandemic. I'm still introducing myself to people. And I'm a social person, but it takes a lot to really embody that and like jump over all the hurdles and say, hey, let's connect. Hey, and to start that relationship. And I'm about that because I want to live that way. So this podcast is really me saying, I want to live that way. And I'm inviting the guests to live that way. And everyone who's listening, it's like saying, yeah, I want that too. So it's just a space for us to kind of do that thing, talk about that thing, and to just kind of jump over all those hurdles, because I feel like the media is constantly putting a new hurdle out there, right?
Hmm.
And we're like, oh, and it's getting harder. Like you're saying, we have more accessibility, but we're retreating into these same
Yeah.
spaces.
Yep.
So it's
Yep.
like all of these things are happening. It's like you have too many wires and it's hard to
Yes.
untangle,
Well, the human mind and the human body was not designed to deal with the stuff that we deal with today. It was not designed to have this, constant, influx of data and information and messaging. And, it's just, yeah, not to say that we're not an intelligent species, we are, but we're just designed to go back to these more simple ways of living, I think, right? I mean, I'm going to go back to you doing the podcast, which is amazing. But I also got to tell people that I met you because you brought people together in running. That was another reason why you were carrying out what you're practicing, what you preach, right? So, one of the things about running that I love so much, and it's because of your influence, was that so many different people from all walks of life that come together and do this one crazy activity where we all get, we're all killing ourselves, hurting our knees and everything just to do this activity that you have to be insane, right? But no, it's the same principle. The thing is, you mentioned before, about trying to get the block parties together. It's almost to the point now, isn't it, where your kind of personality is almost a weird thing. What do you mean you want to do what? Wait. You want to like get people together and like what we have to like what to get like sit together? I mean, I'm being kind of
Yeah, no, it's
sarcastic, but
exactly like that.
it's like I don't know. That's kind of weird. I don't know. I don't have the time for that. Maybe we could just do like a online chat room. This is what you get because we've been programmed to resist any kind of real human interaction, right? I mean, imagine this. Imagine if we had to distill this entire conversation we've had into a text, right? I wouldn't see your emotions. I wouldn't see your look of surprise or your smile or, or you'd misunderstand what I'm saying. Like you have no clue what I really meant. We've just become so detached from any kind of human connection. Again, the empathy, I go back to that word again. You cannot nurture empathy if you don't see a person, if you don't hear a person, if you're not around a person. There's just no connection there. So yeah, I do appreciate your efforts to go back to what I call the old school ways. A lot of them are tried and true, and we really need to get back to them big time. Yeah.
Um, what was what's your mentee's name?
Spencer.
So what was Spencer like when you met him? Like how did
Oh, he was shy, very, very shy and quiet. I would probably joke with him now. I wish you were that quiet now, but no, I'm only kidding. No, he was very quiet. He was always very creative and always, a lot of story, imagination things. And things, that kind of personality. And of course, as he got older, he became a teenager, teenage stuff kicks in, you know what I mean? And we have to keep him out of, out of the way of all those kind of things. Yeah, he was, whenever I look back on it, I always say, I try to imagine what would his life be like if I hadn't been a part of it. And there's no way of guessing that. Really have no idea. I would like to think that I've had a positive impact. Now he's like every person. He's made his, mistakes. He's growing up. He's learning. I mean, that's all of us. I can't, back in my day when we did something bad, no one knew about it because there was no social media. Now you can't even live down all your mistakes. If you make one mistake, you're canceled, right? But yeah, it's been such a rewarding experience. Now, when you're big brothers, the way it works, when they turn 18, they age out, so they're no longer part of the program. But obviously, here we are 3 years later. We're still paired together in our own way. So yeah, it's been an interesting experience to watch someone grow up like that. Yeah, it's been a great experience for me. I think, again, I know a lot of people probably think I can't do that. I don't have the time, or it's not so much a time issue. It really isn't. I mean, Big Brothers, they required that you only get together every other weekends for 4 hours. That was like the minimum they wanted you to do, right? We did more than that,
twice a month, 4 hours each time.
Right. And there are reasons for that, by the way. There are valid reasons why they don't want you to go crazy and overboard, because studies have found that, if you're too much in their lives, you kind of, sometimes there's a risk of usurping the parental role, right? So there might be some confusion as to what's my parent, what's my mentor, can my mentor tell me what to do, can my mother so it gets a little bit too convoluted. So they just kind of keep it at a level where they think it's just enough to have an impact, but not enough to muddy the waters, if that makes sense to you.
Yeah, we met in 2015, and I've seen your connection and the activities that you do, and I could have used a mentor for sure. Mentors definitely help. It's always good to have different perspectives. It's like an uncle. One more. You can have the best parents in the world, but if you have that uncle who has that different perspective, everyone loves that uncle, that aunt. Everyone can benefit from something like that.
And sometimes you need a person that, by the way, that's neutral. So they're not your parent who have an agenda, right? They're your parents. They only have one agenda, right? I'm your parent. Sometimes that outside influence has a more neutral view of your life and a more neutral way of attacking it, So yeah, I think that's a very important thing too.
Do you have, listen, I'm a fan of the LGBT movement. And the reason why is because I see so much oppression and targeting and those kinds of things, which as a Black person, I just automatically was like an ally automatically. I don't need to know anymore. That's it. I'm an ally. As I kept feeling like an ally and not knowing enough, I started doing research. And I read about Stonewall and like the real history that the LGBT movement went through. Like how I don't think people know how really bad it was. Like, what was it like in the 80s, New York? Like, you showed up to New York. What did you see when you got here? Like, it was a crime to be gay almost.
Yeah, I'll tell you my history with this topic because it's quite unusual and interesting. I grew up, I mentioned before, in Sayville, Long Island, which is one of the gayest places in America because it's the place where the ferries take off from mainland Long Island. They go across the Great South Bay to the Fire Island Pines and Cherry Grove, which are very LGBTQ friendly. So that's been going on for a long time. That was going on when I was a kid. So I grew up in this kind of, again, weird bubble where I had my life, but I used to drive by the train station and see all these people coming in from New York City, getting on vans and taxis and going somewhere. And I used to ask my dad, where, and it was kind of like, you used the word others, right? That was kind of the response was, oh yeah, those, I never got a full explanation, quite honestly. So, growing up, I lived there. Then I moved to New York City in the 80s, like you say. And in certain sectors, it was acceptable. In the creative arts, for example, Broadway, in some of those fields, it was very prevalent in terms of the population. People really were supportive, but outside of that, right, like you say, it was not the kind of thing you would go around, trumpeting that you were openly gay. For me, my personal journey, I was married. I was married to a woman for 15 years. That was my life, most of my adult life. That's how I lived until I was 40 years old. And I made some changes in my life and came out. That was a really tough time because, again, of what I perceived would be the reaction to it, not what the reality was. It's how people would view me, right? The same thing as walking into the office that first time. I had the same feelings. Oh my God, people are not going to like me. They're going to abandon me. No one did, but I had this irrational fear. But it's the bravest thing I've ever done, for sure. It's the best thing I've ever done, for sure. And so that history you're talking about, I didn't have that history growing up. We didn't learn about Stonewall in school. I didn't learn anything about Stonewall until I was much older and started reading up on it. And you mentioned something very interesting, because there's a misconception out there that certain groups of people, certain ethnicities, certain Black people, Latino, there's a certain perception there are groups that are more homophobic than others. And I'll tell you that I have found that that's pretty much an equal playing field. I find that I have met people in that category from all walks of life. I don't see it any more prevalent in one group of people than another. However, I will say that one of the things that's forgotten about, unfortunately, is that LGBTQ people have been on the front lines of equality for all people. And you mentioned being an ally. LGBTQ people were allies for the Black Power movement. And conversely, back in a certain era, all of these factions were all working kind of in concert with each other to bring about change in the world, right? It's kind of gotten lost over time. I think we tend, you probably heard this before, but people will say, I'm Black on the outside. I can't walk out of the house and not be Black, right? But you can walk out of the house and not be gay. And I understand that on that academic level. I get it. And they're right, because a lot of us, including myself, have been able to pull that off for long periods of time. But I will say that outside of the realization of that academic level, I think on a moral and a human level, I think it's just important to remember that anytime, Martin Luther King said it best, right? An injustice anywhere is an injustice. I should have gotten that quote right because it's on my office on the wall. An injustice. Oh boy, forget that part. You look it up, but it's true. It's absolutely true. If you see oppression going on anywhere against anyone, it's happening to you too, in a certain way by extension, right? So yeah, I really hope we get to a place in this world where we, again, empathy, we all see our commonalities in the struggle. Listen, here's the bottom line. There's whatever you want to call them up there, that's pulling all the strings, them. We're down here. we're all in the same boat, all of us.
Mm.
We're going to work, we're struggling, we have to pay bills, we have to, all that stuff. We're down here, ultimately, that's all we got. Because what's up here, they don't care. Honestly, they as long as the system's working for them, they're happy. But down here on the ground floor, we're all turning on each other, right? We're just turning on each other.
For me, it's so simple. Like what you're saying is so simple and common sense, like it's very clear. The us versus them, and this kind of there's a hate trickling down and people are buying into it. And, then there's colorism, then there's the evangelicals versus, and it's just all of these little subgroups going against these other subgroups. And then, you have the flare ups and then it goes back underneath ground. And, and it's almost like when things start to heal, there's a flare up.
Yeah. And it's usually something, it's usually a flare up that has usually very little to do with the subject at hand. It just turns into this thing, right? I'm curious if I can ask you. I'm curious because you come from Jamaica, which and that it's just a fact. The laws in Jamaica against homosexuality are severe, and I've actually traveled to countries. We went to the Seychelles right before the pandemic, and we had to go through Doha, which is in Qatar. That was the stopover point, and we would not leave our hotel room because of the laws there. They're quite severe. Meaning me and my husband. So we did not leave the hotel room. So you come from Jamaica. I'm very curious to know how that transition has been for you. In terms of allyship, but also how does it resonate with people, your fellow Jamaicans? How are they invested in it also? Do they think you're an outlier? Like, how does that play out in your life?
I think, when I was growing up, you didn't really see gay. Like I knew it existed. It was something that you were like, you didn't want to be, you would tease each other like, don't be gay, don't be gay. Yep. You heard references in the music, and there was some kind of, just this kind of cloud over that kind of thing. And I do remember I had a classmate who was very like effeminate. And there was no negativity towards him. He always hung out with the girls, and you kind of just got the sense that he was gay. And this was like, 10 years old. So I can tell you, I know gay people were there. And there was this sense of, don't let me find out you're gay because I'll kick your ass kind of thing. But I don't think it's illegal. Like, if you ask me back then or now, I don't think it's like and I could not, maybe I don't even know, but I don't think it's illegal.
I'm not quite sure either, quite honestly.
It's one of those things that's it's still, from my experience, I've been here for more than 20 years. From my experience, it's a taboo kind of thing. It's not openly accepted, but obviously it's gotten more progressive now as we've, time has passed. Yeah. But I never saw anything, and I knew they were there for sure. It was just more undercover kind of thing.
Yeah.
But I think Jamaicans in general are just like everyone else, I would say. You don't want the people around you to be stigmatized. I think it's less of an issue with being gay and more of an issue of, I don't want you to get the stigma. So like, you wouldn't want your kid to get the stigma, or like, I hope you're not, so that you wouldn't get the stigma, as opposed to those people are really bad, Yeah. And I grew up very Christian conservative, and obviously the church made a clear message that it's not good kind of thing. But it it was just, it was one of the many things that they spewed off about, that it wasn't a big focus. It was just like, you know,
Yeah.
um, I think that it's not going away, or it's, the evangelicals are still holding on to it the same way they're holding on to this abortion thing. Like, they have this agenda, and again, it keeps stirring up people.
Yeah.
And I'm fighting the battle of being an ally to everyone and breaking down the concept of the other, to, like
Mhm.
you're saying, us versus them. And within it's a divide and conquer. And the idea is, instead of uniting, you can't unite with people you don't fully understand.
That's
You
right.
can't unite with people who are hiding. If you're hiding, and you're living a lifestyle where I don't know what you do, you can't expose what you do because now it's going to have all these consequences, then you're not going to come to the block party. You're not going to you can't bring your boyfriend or your husband to the block party because now it's going to bring this problem for you.
Mhm.
So it's a divide and conquer. And that's really what I'm trying to highlight here is, it's still real. The LGBT movement, we've made progress, but in a lot of ways, there's still these huge walls. You still go to a gay bar instead of the same bar.
Yeah. Yeah, and those places used to be refuges, obviously, where gay people could go live freely. Now that they're more mainstreamed, we're starting to see those things break down as well. But there's still, yeah, it's you brought up a point before, and I want to tie this into it. And now it just escaped my mind. Wouldn't you know it? I'll come back to it. But yeah, I just think that, again, to go back to that word again, empathy, it's like, I may not understand what it means to be LGBTQ. I may not even like it. But I understand, as a human being, you deserve dignity and respect, and I will do everything in my power to make sure you have that. That's it. Like, that's the stance. There is no other stance. That's the stance, right? But unfortunately, we don't see that. No, we don't see that at all. And you said it perfectly: divide and conquer. It's this group is bad. They're not here for you. They're not supporting you. They have their own agenda. We always hear that word agenda, and I always joke. I say, people say, what does agenda mean? Like, my agenda is, I wake up every morning the same guy. I do this. I eat my breakfast, brush my teeth, take a shower, and get dressed. I go to work. I come home. I pay my bills. I see my family. That's my agenda. I have no other agenda, right? It's like, I keep on hearing this agenda thing. What is it? What is the gay agenda? Yeah, I just, listen, you brought up religion, and that's tied into all of this, of course, as it is in a lot of things. I also grew up a Christian conservative. That was my environment as well. I'm a Catholic Church dropout. I heard all those messages, and I still do to this day. I describe myself today, I am not religious at all. I am spiritual. That's the way I describe it now. That's where I like to land on this. I'm a spiritual person. I believe in spirituality. And I think, if I could be so bold, because it sounds like it contradicts what I just said, I think this world is really missing spirituality. I think that's one of the problems we're facing right now, is that we've lost this concept of things greater than ourselves, right? We don't have a compass, a moral compass anymore, right? I think that's also missing. Now, granted, again, talking about the old days and the good old days, I'm not saying that the good old days of, the nun hitting you over the knuckles with a ruler, I'm not saying that's all good. I'm just saying that whether you call it religion or you call it spirituality, or whatever you want to call it, I think we're missing that moral compass, however form that takes with you. I, for example, believe in Buddhist principles. That's how I like to lead my life. So whether it's that or something else, I don't have a problem with any religion, but I do have a problem when it's used as a tool to oppress others.
Right.
That to me is not the role of religion at all. Yeah, it's but by the same token, I do believe that we need to find this, we need to recenter our moral compass again. To I always say to Christians, I say, listen, you always ask the question, what would Jesus do, right? Well, that's a good question. What would Jesus do? You're certainly not doing it. So do you have an answer to that question? So yeah.
It's one of these things now where, everybody's a Christian. It's one of those things. So you have, good Christian, you have, everyone's a Christian. So there's no, before a Christian was a specific thing. Now everyone's a Christian. The racist is a Christian.
Or pretend to be anyway, yeah.
Right, the racist is a Christian. The you know what I mean? Everyone's a Christian. I know what you mean. So it doesn't have before a Christian was, if you needed help, you would go to the Christians. If you needed acceptance, go to, but now, and that's a part of it.
It is a part of it, for sure. It's the what would Jesus do part. That's what, it is that. It's like you're professing to be this thing, right? But I haven't seen any evidence.
That's what I was going to say. Everyone's a Christian, but no one's reading the Bible. No one's
living the principles.
No one's living the principle, doing the work. It's just a necklace now.
It is. Yeah, unfortunately. And that's not everyone, but yes, you're right. It's unfortunately and listen, here's the bottom line. That group, that sector of quasi-Christians, whatever you want to call it, they have the ear of people. Like they had the ear of lawmakers. They had the ear of, the right-wing conservative talk show hosts, just like the extreme left has the ear of people as well. On the fringes, there are a lot of people out there living their lives in these areas. I always like to think, especially as I get older, that we all kind of have to come a little bit to the middle more, just a little bit more, not saying you have to give up everything. I'm just saying, let's just start like figuring out the commonalities in the middle, right? Where we all could benefit. Because right now, our country is being governed and is being controlled by a certain loud group of people, right? So, I just think, again, going back to what we said before, start putting into practice what you preach, right? Just like you said before, you do the block parties, you practice what you preach. It's not just wishing it or thinking about it, it's actually putting it into some kind of plan. That's, yeah.
You should definitely come visit Princeton sometime.
I know Princeton extremely well.
Sounds like it.
Well, I worked there for 9. I worked on Witherspoon Street, and Princeton was my life for 9 years. I was there every single day. I know Nassau Street very well. I know some of the places are still around, but
I'm sure most of it's still here.
Yeah, probably.
Small World Coffee.
Yeah, I think that was there. Yeah. I'm trying to remember some other places that were, God, this is going way back. I was in Princeton from 1987 to 1994. So
university's still here.
Oh yeah, no, I mean, yeah, I know that never changes. That never changes. Back when I was in Princeton, I remember Brooke Shields, the actress, was big at that time, and I interviewed her a couple of times. But yeah, Princeton was a very interesting place. And I lived in East Windsor, which was a couple of towns over.
Yeah.
Right on the border with Cranberry. I lived there for a few years, actually more than a few years, but yeah, that's my former life in central New Jersey.
No, my goal is to live the life that I can tell my grandkids about.
Yeah.
And I also want to say that, 10, 15 years from now, I can look back and say, I created something like Runners United. I can look back and say, I created something. Look at us. Not just, instead of getting caught up in what everybody else is doing, like I feel like I spend too much time isolated in my house. So I'm trying to break that.
Hmm.
I don't care if everyone else is isolated. I'm not gonna live isolated. I'm gonna knock on my neighbor's door, be that weird guy, and they're gonna say, "Hey, wait a minute. I am alone here too." And that's the benefit of having kids. Like, you're less scary when you have kids. I'm
Exactly.
serious.
Yeah, yeah, no, it's true. It's like that, that little inn you have. It's like a cute little dog too.
Yeah,
You have
yeah. So that's it. I have my dog and my kids, and I'm like, hey. They're like, oh well. I see him all the time. He's not gonna like do anything.
Right, exactly. Yeah.
Um, it's one of those things, and I try to use that, and that's what I'm trying to do. I don't want to necessarily change. I want to change the world, but like you're saying, you start small.
You do. You do. You start
So
on your block. Like you're
exactly,
saying, you start
exactly.
with one person, start on your block. You hope that it's contagious and that it somehow, takes off. You brought up a great point, and I want to touch on that too real quickly, because the pivot that I've made, it's very, very simple, especially in today's world with social media and everything, every day. It's so easy to get caught up in everyone else's drama, right? It's like, it's right at your fingertips. You see drama everywhere, you see bad things everywhere. And it's really easy to get sucked into that. It's like I call it circling the drain, right?
Hmm.
And you really, really have to make an intentional effort every day, not to ignore what's going on, but to put it in its place, let it sit there on its own, and continue to create your own joy and spread that joy to other people, right?
Discernment and
Yeah, yeah,
drowning out the noise. When you
that's
were
right.
talking about the internet and all this information, it's a lot of noise,
Yes,
and the brain can only focus on so much at a time. So
right.
you have to be careful to know, to have the discernment to say, this is what I need to pay attention to. This is what I need to drown out into the background.
That's right.
And
It's in the moment. It's knowing in the moment that you're being manipulated. That's the most important thing. It's knowing I just sat down, I started scrolling endlessly for no reason. I am currently being manipulated. I need to stop, right? And it's that constant awareness, right? It's also the awareness, and I plead guilty to this. It's the awareness that all that stuff coming at you starts making you a different person. You start expressing yourself differently. You become angry and bitter. I, again, guilty as charged. Anyone who reads my Facebook page knows that I have my days, but it's that constant growing process of reining that in, right? Without totally ignoring everything going on around you, because we can't live that way either. But putting it, again, compartmentalizing it to its proper place and living a life of joy again, and spreading it to other people in your very limited way that you can do it, you know? So yeah, just keep on that path and hope that others follow your lead. That's all you can hope for. That's
I've
all
had,
you can hope for.
I've had so many conversations that kind of goes down this road that I'm just like, all right, if I can package it up and then maybe like say, hey, Mark, you're like me and Mark, so come over here.
Right.
That's basically the whole concept in a nutshell.
Yeah.
And people are like, well, what do we do when we hang out? Like you're saying, like just to highlight the fact that we're just regular people trying to figure it out, just like you.
Yeah.
Give people a taste of who we are in real life. That's what I'm trying to do.
We all have the same goals and fears and issues. And, we all have the same humanity in the end. We all have different interests and experiences to some degree, but at the core, we all have the same common goal, and that is to live a happy, fulfilled life. You mentioned before, how do you define success? When I was 20 years old or 18, walking into that Wall Street office, my definition of success was making money. That's it. I mean, that's getting 18-year-old. I wanted to make money. That was success to me. At this age, now here I am 40 years later, Success to me has nothing to do with that. It has absolutely nothing to do with money or career or that kind of success. To me, success is, I want people, you said it before, I want people to look back on my life and say, wow, he really did everything he could to make this world a better place. That's success to me. Your legacy, that's the word I'm looking for. Your legacy is your success. And again, going back to nature, it's like nature doesn't care how rich you are, how it doesn't care. The earth doesn't care about us at all. I mean, I hate to say it. The earth doesn't care. It's gone on without us. It was here before us.
It's non-discriminate.
It is not. And so knowing that you're here for this little microcosm of time and you have no impact on the world really long term, although that's debatable now what we're doing to the earth, that's another topic. We have to leave our little stamp on our lives and say, wow, I left this world, hopefully better for me being here, right? That's it. To me, that's success. And in your case, I think success also to me would be, my children and how they navigate the world and what kind of adults they grow up to be. That's also a measure of success.
Passing the baton.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's a long race, right? Life is a marathon and I'm passing the baton. The goal is to instill the right things, have them be good human beings, and understand these core values that we're talking about, and understand the trajectory of where we're going, and making sure that they're contributing to the balance on the right side, the right side of history, so to speak.
That's right. That's right. Absolutely. I like the way you snuck the marathon reference in. That was pretty clever.
All right, so I'm gonna wrap it up, but let's take a brief break first.